Here. And if you're able to, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Great. Thank you. So, public comment. Does anybody want to make a comment from the public that is not on the agenda tonight? Please come up and do so. All right, I see none. I'll bring it back to the council. We have a presentation. We have plenty of time to listen to, to Ben Horstein talk about the Marin Municipal Water District rate increase proposal. It is just a presentation. I know there's many questions for Ben, so I will open up to the public and you're able to ask the questions. But first, Ben, come on up. Thanks for being here. And let's hear what you have to say.
Good evening, Mayor Morrison, council members. Without this, I'm lost. My name is Ben Hornstein. I'm the general manager at Marin Municipal Water District. And thank you for the opportunity to be here. This is part of our planned outreach program, getting out to the public and our partners in the community to talk about this rate increase that is being proposed at the district. I know, as an aside, that our staff has good working relationships with your staff, particularly as it regards to our pipe work and street work, and more coordination going on to benefit both agencies. I am here to talk about the rate increase proposal and as much to share the investment in our infrastructure that the rate proposal is intended to support. We're proposing to raise rates to invest in our aging infrastructure to ensure, of course, we meet our mission of providing water day in, day out, responsibly manage our watershed that we're entrusted with the community, and continue to offer the level of service that's expected. As the oldest water district in California, as you know, and all stewards of public infrastructure grapple with, our infrastructure is aging. We have 3 treatment plants, 6 dams, 128 storage tanks, 900 miles of pipe, and it goes on and on. The average age of our infrastructure is 60 years old, and the replacement value of the infrastructure is over $2 billion. Translating that, our capital program annual that is being supported by this fee that I'll be talking about is a 1% of the value of our infrastructure. So with infrastructure 60 years old out of the gate is where we find ourselves. That's a rather modest level of investment by any measure, I believe. Of course, we also are the largest landowner on Mount Tam with our watershed over 20,000 acres. We get over 2 million visitors a year. And now we face, the ongoing challenge of responding to climate change and the wildfire risk, and that takes investment to do things like fuel reduction and a range of other activities that we're involved in. As an organization, we do have a long history of controlling costs. 14 out of the last 25 years, we've had no rate increases, which is unusual for an organization like ours, and we've reduced costs and staffing levels and the like. At the same time, costs have gone up, and we do have responsibilities to meet. So specifically, the rate increase proposed is 4% in our operating budget for the next 4 years, and notably a capital maintenance fee to support our capital investment program, and I'll talk more about that going forward. It's also intended to support additional investment in the watershed to address the wildfire risk that we face here. The capital maintenance fee, which is what we call this new fee, is based on meter size, and the funds will directly go into our capital investment program, as I noted. The part of this year-to-year, this new fee, and the resultant year-to-year impact in rates is to move us off debt funding for routine investment. This $20 million a year has been going on for some time and will go on, it's fair to say, forever. Because facilities continue to age, $2 billion in assets, and shifting from our past practice of debt funding to pay-as-you-go or cash funding takes a tremendous long-term interest load off the ratepayers, albeit this, we're recognizing this year to year is a notable increase. With that, I'll just go into this, and I just have a few slides, and then, of course, there'll be questions. I think I generally covered why we're proposing to raise rates, invest in aging infrastructure, better manage this debt that's accrued, manage the watershed and the level of service, the 4% per year, along with this new capital maintenance fee, and I'll get into the details of it. First, this just reflects our recent history over the last, 30 years. The green bars reflect the years where we've had no rate increase. The gray line reflects where the rate would be currently were we to increase based on inflation. So even with this increase, we're below where we'd be based on inflation. And the upper line is based on a survey that is done nationally of comparable water agencies that you can see are finding themselves where we find ourselves in aging infrastructure and the need to increase the rate of investment, bring in additional revenues, and pass on that cost to the rate base. This is something we always do when we look at rates, comparable survey. This first blue bar is where we are now on the very low end of comparable agencies around the Bay Area. And this is the second blue bar is where we find ourselves with the proposed increase, close to the middle. And this reflects this one-time establishment of the fee, and I'm certain we'll soon migrate back down close to where we are now going forward over time. This is the fee and starts to show the impact of the fee. As I noted, it's based on meter size. That's the number of meters we have based on size, the number of customers. The annual meter charge for a 5/8 inch meter is $163.50 a year. And collectively it brings in $16.5 million, along with our fire flow fee brings us to approximately the $20 million annual capital investment program. A lot of attention, of course, throughout all of Northern California, learned from the tragedies in the North Bay, wildfire risk, and we all understand certainly the issue. We do a lot of work, and part of the proposed fee is dedicating an additional $1 million a year in addition to our current expenditure targeted at fire reduction on the watershed to protect the community, largely focused on fuel reduction activities, so clearing brush and that kind of work. This is a table, I won't get into the details of it, but it's intended to illustrate, if you look on the first line across, that's our water district, the number of, the extent of the infrastructure we have, 900 miles of pipe, 128 tanks, and 97 pump stations is very unique for this size system, and is driven by largely by the topography we have in Marin with the hills and the valleys and the ridges that require a lot of tanks, a lot of piping, a lot of pumping, and that cost with, in some cases, 10 times the amount of infrastructure of comparable agencies has to be maintained and does get passed on to our rate base, which is actually interesting. We find ourselves with our rates on the low end that suggest, some level of fiscal responsibility over the years for the district's board and staff. This just is intended to impress you in terms of the just vast array of infrastructure right under the streets. As you all know, it's a complex system delivering water to the tap with a tremendous amount of infrastructure behind it. In terms of impact to the average customer, and we define that the best way we can, and it's the residential customers with a 5/8 inch meter using a certain amount of water. Anyway, $2.71 a month increase with the 4% increase to our operating budget. And on a monthly basis, the capital maintenance fee is $13.63. So collectively, about $16 increase a month. And on a percentage basis, that is significant. Anywhere from 25%. If someone's a very low water user, it could be higher. So on a percentage year-to-year increase, it's very significant. Of course, the subsequent 3 years are 4%. So everyone, you could average over 4 years, look at the year-to-year impact, but this is what it means to current customers. And of course, those that have larger meters, this fee is spread out based on meter size, would pay more in some cases. If you're a business with a 4-inch meter, far more from that earlier table I showed than $163 a year. In terms of directly, the impact based on our best estimate, looking at the meters you have in the city, the annual increase to you is approximately $20,000 a year to the city for your water service, this rate increase. Well, due to the new fee. And then on top of that, there is a 4% increase in our operating budget. So with that, I would take questions, or if you choose to open it up.
Ben, I wanted to make sure, so increase to Larkspur is $20,927 plus the 4% increase?
That's correct.
Plus?
Yes.
Okay.
That we wanted to show the direct impact of this new fee, because that's not easy for a public agency that has a number of different meters in different areas, so we wanted to do that. The 4% is easier to calculate. I don't know exactly what your water bills are, but the 4% is in addition to the $20,000 that's directly attributed to this new capital investment fee.
Great, okay, thank you. So council members, any questions? Okay.
I have a lot of questions, but I'm sure we have some from the audiences too, so I'll sort of wait and see some of them. But will you please describe the public process that's gone through as far as this discussion of this rate increase? Did it begin in December of last year in the public process?
No, this has been going on well over a year. We've had, I think now, 18 publicly noticed meetings. Some, yes, are committee meetings, but they're all publicly noticed, of course, and agendized. The earlier meetings were talking about generally the financial condition of the district and looking at options and bringing ideas to the board, and then it evolved. Since December, we have been working with a citizen advisory panel that with 3 meetings, but rather long meetings, we were able to go into detail on the capital need and the approach for financing, and that did conclude with a letter to our board from the panel that concluded, and they continue to speak different than you may hear tonight from some, that this fee is not enough, that based on their review, based on the watershed needs, the fee should be higher. Just sharing that written letter that's on our website. So I think a pretty, I won't judge the public process, but 18 meetings, a community advisory panel, and then now we're going out. I was at Rotary Club today, and going to city councils in any venue we can find that can take some time to hear us.
And how would a residential customer know what size water meter they would fall under categorically?
Yeah, so it is on their water bill. If they have questions, they could call us up. We are posting by tomorrow a website that has, we think, all the information folks would be interested in, including a bill calculator where they could put in their usage and their meter size and come up with what the increase would be based on an online calculator to assist customers in understanding the impact individually.
I'm a little, I'd like a little more explanation as to why water customers who conserve or maybe have a change in their household status from, two teenagers go to college and their water consumption goes down, they'll be charged higher amounts.
Well,
Even though they're consuming less.
right. Part of, there's a specific question, but generally part of the challenge in the water business is water is really, I think we've done ourselves a disservice by linking usage to cost directly. Water is a service that we provide, and there's a tremendous amount of cost that goes into having water available when you turn on the tap, regardless how much you use. So that's part of the answer. Second is the more you link water usage to cost, as folks conserve, you lose revenue and you increase rates, right? And that's a very hard discussion to have. Specifically here, we're apportioning the fee based on meter size. And the intent behind that is a restaurant that has a 4-inch meter size can exert a demand on our system that our infrastructure needs to support. We can't look at today how much that restaurant is utilizing, because if they have a 4-inch meter and they've made the business decision because there's a cost to a higher meter, significant cost, we have to assume at some point they will be pulling that demand from the system. So infrastructure is not designed based on use today. It's based on projections into the future, and in part by looking at the meter sizes out there. In your scenario, the customer does have a path, and as part of this process, we plan to streamline it and define it better where they could downsize their meter size very easily and not have to bear that cost.
I have more, but I'll wait. Well, one more about meter size, because I've always, when we've had presentations by Marin Municipal Water, the issue of San Quentin has always sort of been not fully elaborated as to what the water consumption at San Quentin, how that affects our rates, and how they will be impacted by this change, or will they be?
All customers will be, including San Quentin. The amount of their impact, I don't have that number. I don't know we've yet specifically calculated that. We do intend to calculate it to all large customers, public agencies, San Quentin, school districts, and communicate that in the next week or so to them. But I don't have that. But absolutely, everyone that has a potable water meter based on the size will see this fee.
So if those aren't calculated yet, how do you come up with the numbers that would then be the factorial numbers for what the other customers are going to have to pay?
Right. So the number was calculated based on our known number and sizes of meters, potable water meters in the system. I haven't apportioned that for every user that may have multiple meters individually. That hasn't yet been calculated. We're in the process of doing that.
It seems, all right.
Anyway, Dan,
You answered my question.
I do want to note, I don't know if I captured it in my comments or presentation, that fire flow lines are not part of this fee, and that's created some confusion in the public. Here, there probably is a separate fire line feeding this building. I don't know, maybe not. But, right, it's driven by fire sprinkler requirements and renovations and have gotten triggered. Anyway, so the fire lines are designed, of course, for life and property safety. They don't exert an ongoing demand on the system, and they're very rarely, if ever, fortunately utilized. So they are not part of, and some of the numbers you may have seen, these hundreds of thousands of dollars for school districts, I don't know where they came from, but I believe they erroneously included fire lines in the calculation of what that fee would be.
Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've heard from a fair number of people complaining about both the process and the outcome of this decision-making effort. You mentioned that there were 18 meetings. How many of those meetings actually were convened to address the specifics of the rate increase?
Well,
Doesn't sound like many.
I would say the specifics certainly evolved over time.
That's not
Building
my
blocks-
question. I'd like a more specific
I don't
answer.
have that number.
Yeah. So 1, 2?
No, there's been far more than that, but I don't have the number.
Yeah. So the other concern that I've heard expressed again focuses on basing the rates on meter size as opposed to water consumption.
Right.
Can you provide us a little bit more of an explanation of the economic justification for focusing on meter size versus water use? It seems to provide an inappropriate incentive in terms of consumption.
Yeah, and that's a fair point. I'd say throughout the country, as an example, most often connection fees. So when someone hooks up to the system, they essentially buy in with a connection fee. They're buying into the infrastructure. Most often that's based on meter size for the same reason this fee is, in that meter size most accurately or is a good indication of the demand on the system. So a 1-inch meter is inherently limited in terms of how much water can be pulled from the system. A 4-inch meter is probably tenfold that amount of water. So if today that restaurant or business is not using anywhere near,
Or a residential customer.
or a residential customer is not using the water reflected in the meter size, but it also holds certainly for residential customers, it could be. And as we master plan the long-term infrastructure, that we expect with modern materials and techniques to last 100 years, how do we plan for that? And meter size in the system is an indicator of the potential draw that, of course, we have to plan for in size.
But not the actual draw,
Not the actual draw today, but,
or in the future.
well, it could be. So if a resident has a 1.5-inch meter in their home, there are exceptions to this I'll touch on, but generally, aside from the trigger of fire sprinklers that we're trying to deal with separately, generally you would find those higher meter sizes in large homes with large irrigation demands, generally. And the reason for that is on our bi-monthly bill, we have fixed charges based on meter size. So economically, someone, if they don't need that size meter, they would downsize. But part of our efforts in this process are to well communicate that to our ratepayers to ensure they understand they easily, if you don't need a 1.5-inch meter and you could do with a 5/8, that's where you should go, and here's the easy path for you to pursue that option. Otherwise, it's, I think, fairly rational for us to assume that they want that meter there for a reason, because they may exert the demand on the system. And the time they would exert it for residential meters is during the peak demand periods in the hot summer months that we must have water available. We must have pump sized tank sizes and adequate water supply to meet that demand.
But you could recapture those costs if you had a rate based upon water usage. If they crank up their water usage, they're going to pay more money. I don't understand the rationale at all.
Okay.
It's fine.
And Ben, how much does it cost to change out your meter?
If you go up, it would trigger a review. Going down would just be the cost of the meter and the plumbing costs. I don't have that number, but I believe you would get a payback in a fairly brief amount of time, given the monthly fees you incur with a higher meter and certainly this fee as well.
All right, so Ben, thank you for the presentation. I'm going to open up to the, first, any more questions from the council? No?
Thank you.
I'm going to go up to the public. So if you can have a seat, and I believe there's many questions for you. So if you can write them down and then come back and answer the questions.
Will do.
That's great. Thanks, Ben. All right, so I'm going to close it from the council, open to the public. Got to hammer away. No, I think we're going to be okay. So come on up. I trust you're all organized, and you're not going to take up too much time, correct?
Less than 3 minutes.
Okay, so I won't put on my timer, because
You don't
I
have to.
trust the
Trust
system
me.
here. All right, so
Try not to ramble on here.
please say your name and where you're from and the questions you have, and Ben will get back to them.
Mike Popovich, Larkspur, MMWD customer since 1955. Okay, so I have some concerns and questions as well. I've written it down, so I'll just kind of read it. Sorry about that. I don't have the exact revenue figures for the past 100 years, but I do for the last 15. So since 2005 or so, MMWD has generated just under $1 billion of revenue from its ratepayers, from the district they serve. They're proposing a 4-year rate increase starting in July, and I don't want to repeat all this again, $163, $409 to at least 20% of the customer base. Also another 4% increase annually. I believe that's year after year after year. So I guess my comments are, with $1 billion in revenue, just over the past 13, 15 years, let alone the past 100 years, why haven't these capital improvements, maintenance, renovation issues, been planned for, properly financed, and executed over the past several decades? A question, why switch from financing these major projects to a cash basis? As a matter of fact, the city of Larkspur, who changed my mind about this not long ago, did just the opposite when faced with the task of replacing 30-plus miles of city streets. Can Ben demonstrate how financing will cost ratepayers hundreds of millions of dollars in interest? I mean, what does that mean? $300, $500, $900 million? MMWD's statements show approximately $114 million in revenue bonds today. How much interest will that cost the ratepayers over the next 20 or 30 years? Not a lot of detail in the reports they provide. So if they're using our property tax bill to collect this money for CapEx, maintenance, et cetera, is it not a tax? And if so, don't we, the ratepayers, have the right and the responsibility to vote on this proposal? In reviewing, and this was interesting, long read, but I did it. In reviewing the 2014 5-year strategic plan, I counted 5 goals, 30 strategies, and 120 objectives. On top of that, they have a vision statement, mission statement, and their values. They advise that a scorecard will be established and accompany the plan. But I looked and looked and looked, and there was no scorecard to be found. So before we start throwing more and more money to this agency, shouldn't we have a serious review of the success or failure of this group over the years? I mean, how they do on the strategic plan. And I've done plenty of those. So at the very least, MMWD needs to take a timeout, step out of the shadows, and shine some light on this crucial proposal. They need to have extensive dialogue with the ratepayers whom they expect to foot the tab. And honestly, I know 18, 16, I don't know how many meetings there have been, but I was not aware of many of them, quite frankly. So I urge you not to support them in their efforts to steamroll this proposal through. These are huge sums of money, our money. They need to take their time, inform and educate the public, and get it right. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Cindy Winter, Green Bay. I like Mike Popovich's idea because I've always liked Measure B. And if we could finance these water improvements, it would be a lot easier on many Larkspur residents. We have many financially comfortable people here, but there are also seniors and others who have trouble keeping a roof over their head. And if they could pay less, that would be financed over many years, I think that would be more fair for their situation. And also for the schools, I'm really worried about a huge lump sum assessment, so to speak, coming into the schools when the Larkspur Corte Madera School Board had to cut its staff, and that was evidently a very painful experience, and Redwood High is going to have more students, and so they're going to have a need for more water. And I just think that this project has to be thought through with some financial experts. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Hi, Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Effel. I live in Larkspur. And I did send the council members a memo from myself and Mimi Willard about a lot of the things that I think are wrong with this proposal. But the two speakers who spoke just now, I think hit it right on the head about what one of the big problems with this, which is trying to pay for capital expenditures with short-term money. Interest rates have stayed at historically low rates. And don't tell me you want to save me those interest rates. That's like buying a house with cash. Some people do it, but most of us want a mortgage and to pay off that large debt over time at a low interest rate. That's just the fair thing to do. Now, MMWD hasn't done that. And the mismanagement reflected in this is not Ben's fault. The 5 board members of MMWD have been there for years. Ben just got here. So he's the new guy they send out to sell this lousy program. But it's not his fault that they got it. Their process, he said there were 18 meetings. I don't know if there were nearly that many meetings, but almost every meeting MMWD has is replete with Brown Act violations. And you guys know how to do this. You put it on your agenda. You supply the staff reports at the same time as the agenda. They don't do that. They rely often on PowerPoint presentations, which nobody sees until the meeting. So the plan is flawed, the process is flawed, and who knows what size their meters are? You know, I don't know what size my meter is. And putting it on the tax bill instead of the water bill, is that so they can hide it? I don't know. I don't even know if that's legal. And this business about the meter size is, you hit it right on the head. It makes no sense. People don't use water based on the size of their meter. At least most residential customers don't. They use water based on what they need water for. And it only seems fair to have at least some link to water usage and to put it on the water bill. And we would appreciate it if you would say to MMWD, we don't like your plan. It's going to cost Larkspur City as well as its resident money, too. You know that, right? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Laura. Okay.
James Holmes, Larkspur. Not to be cute, but it's pretty tough to outdo Marin Sanitary in terms of rate increases, but I think Marin Muni has managed to do it. I'll just make a couple of quick points. Apropos of the public process, according to the Independent Journal, last night's Marin Muni Water District meeting was to decide whether or not to go forward with a rate increase, but apparently they had already decided to do that by last Friday, because on last Friday's council agenda here, it said there was going to be an explanation regarding the rate increase. So it seems like there was a pre-decision with respect to what they did last night, and I hope that's not indicative of the way the public process is going to be in the future. I've read as indications that the rate increase, including fees, between 2007 and 2017 was as much as 315%. That's just astonishing and amazing. And I think we really have to step back. A couple other points. I have to wonder if the Marin Muni Water District is really focusing on need to have rather than nice to have. Last year, there was a huge presentation in Corte Madera at the rec center about e-bikes on the trails. Well, regardless of whether or not you agree with that or not, that's not something essential. And I don't think they should be introducing new initiatives if the rates are this much of a problem. Just yesterday or the day before, or well, maybe last week, I saw a long announcement in the public notices about a tremendous watershed management process they're embarking on. Are they really economizing to the maximum extent possible, or are they engaging in non-frivolous but non-essential types of planning and initiatives? And finally, I know that this council is very reluctant to engage in or to encroach upon the bailiwicks of other agencies or to comment on the doing of other agencies. But given the vast amount of the increase here, and given the impact on your residents and the impact on the city, I think it would be justified for this council to follow the example of San Anselmo's council and to take a stand against it. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Anyone else? All right.
Okay, just was looking if anybody else wanted to go first.
Maybe we'll give you 5 minutes, okay?
Oh, thank you very much. I have a number of questions here. And I just want to start by saying that the core issue here is that we have a fee that is tied to meter. And that has now been, as of last night, moved forward to a Prop 218 mailing. And basically what happens is that becomes kind of the template for what they can do less than, but within that structure. So they can't move to an entirely new structure within the context of mailing that Prop 218. I don't know whether they can move it off of the tax bill onto the water bill, but I'm pretty sure that they can't go from meter-based to usage-based without doing a new notification to the public and go through the process again. But that's what should happen. I have a number of questions that I'm going to use this forum to ask because I can't get answers to these questions, and I think they're important. So I hope that they will get answered tonight, and I know there's a long list of things you have to answer. The first one is, what other water districts have put a large capital fee on the tax bill without a vote? I have Googled, and I can't find them. They may be out there, but I can't find them. Secondly, there's nothing to prevent you from putting a capital charge on the water bills. So why not do that? It's intuitively obvious to all of us that this belongs on the water bill. The fact that you maybe could put it on the tax bill, no, I think most people don't think as a good justification. Thirdly, how do you justify allocating nearly 80% of the CMF to the homeowner who uses only 58% of the water, and thereby giving large customers a really good deal by comparison, your malls and office buildings and so on? Fourthly, what is the real average CMF that will be charged to residential customers? The Water District's promotional material, you saw it tonight, highlights average customer impact is $163 a year. $163 is the lowest number that's charged under the CMF. It just happens to be applied to the largest number of people. But that's not how you do an average. The average has to include those with 163, 409 like I have. Somebody I heard last night had 817 because he has a 1.5-inch meter that he has no choice about having. So I'd like to know what's the real average. Next question, which I've asked repeatedly and I never get an answer to. How many low water usage homeowners are in the 1-inch meter group that will be charged $409? That's a fifth of all people, and a lot of them, I believe, I certainly know several, use 5 CCFs per billing period, which is considered quite low. Another bunch use under 10, which is moderately low. I'd like to know how many low water users are getting a whopping big bill here. I would like to know also, what discussions did you have with the schools in developing your CMF proposal and plans to put it on the tax bill? I can tell you they are in a state of panic at Tamalpais Union High School District because they're going to live or die on the ability to renew their $450 parcel tax, which expires in 2022, and they will try to get it renewed conservatively in 2020, in November 2020. So for the person who has okay, I'll try to speed it up here. Next question. How many of the meetings which you mentioned, the 18 meetings, actually mentioned on the agenda rates or fee? I think the answer is 0.
One more question. You need.
One more question. I have to think about the most important one of my many unanswered questions. Do you intend to provide some kind of exemption for residential customers who have to have a 1-inch meter because they have sprinklers? And this is required by code in some instances when you have a renovation. And how do you justify what you do or don't do for those people relative to parity, in that if you cut a special deal for 1-inch people who have sprinklers, what about all the other 1-inch people? And conversely, you've got private fire line customers who are going to be exempt with much bigger meters that are there to service hydrants and sprinklers.
Great, thank you. Mimi,
Thank
can you
you.
state your full name?
Yes,
and
I'm
where
sorry.
live?
Thank
No
you, Ann.
worries.
I should have done that. It's Mimi Willard, and I am president of the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers. And we believe in sensible taxes, and we understand the need for taxes to support vital services, and we do think infrastructure is important.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Ben, we look forward to these answers. Thank you.
I'll try and roll quickly and
Appreciate
take any
that.
follow-up you may have. There's a quoted number. I haven't done the math on how much in revenue we've brought in the last 10 years and why this work hasn't been done. I assume it's an accurate number, and we do have a sizable operating budget. We do have a capital program, so you add it all together, it comes up with a big number, and I think the $1 billion is generally accurate. Our operating budget is around currently $100 million a year, including some capital work. So that does seem on par to me. Why hasn't this work been done? This work has been done. We continue to invest in the infrastructure, and we've been doing it with debt funding. We've, I think in the last 10 years, the organization, and someone mentioned, and it's true, I'm new. It doesn't mean I don't know what I'm talking about, or I haven't lived 7 days a week understanding the finances and this rate proposal, and that I can't speak and support it. But nonetheless, the work has been going on, and it's going to go on for decades, and the costs are only going to increase. That's the truth. It's a daunting task ahead of us to maintain this vital infrastructure, this life safety infrastructure, to enhance the work on the watershed. And that's what this is about. So we can't, in my view, miss the forest for the trees here, notwithstanding some process issues that have been raised. Why not debt funding? I think the organization has done a good job over the last 10 years taking advantage of historically low rates. We are bumping up against our debt capacity. We have a big debt burden to the ratepayers, including interest costs. We have calculated that were we to go out for debt financing for this 10-year program that the fee is supporting, we would almost double the cost to pass on to the ratepayers with interest rates, about $107 million in avoided interest payments that translate over 30 years of the debt, even though it's only funding 10 years of the program, is approximately $90 per ratepayer in savings. So, and of course, after the 10 years, there'd be more debt, 10 years, more debt. The accumulation, and this is bread and butter capital work. This is somewhat akin, it's not totally fair analogy, of credit carding groceries and just building up that debt. We all understand personally what happens, and same for businesses and public agencies, to rely on debt for ongoing investment needs. Our plan is to save debt capacity for the big one-off investments that will happen. Natural disasters, we're in seismic country, dams, staggering in cost, and we're hopeful, but at some point, big investments that are going to be one-off, that we will, of course, go out for debt and spread those costs over the long term. But these annualized costs that are going to go on forever, it's actually fiscally prudent to do cash funding, I believe, and I think this works. The property tax bill, is this a tax? It's not a tax. The property tax is the collection mechanism. You're probably well aware many sanitary districts in the county throughout the state use the property tax as a means of collecting their rates. It's a common practice. The one reason the district is moving forward with this approach versus putting it on the bi-monthly bill, I am hearing and I'm appreciating the concern that is there a question of transparency by doing that? The board is looking at putting a line item on the bill to make it very clear that there is money being collected on the property tax to address the transparency, but more operatively, by putting it on the property tax, and folks debate this understandably, the property owner generally pays the property tax bill. And we're talking about long-term investments in the system that will be for decades in the future and enhance the value of the property versus water bills that are often paid by renters. And I didn't know, but the staff looked at it, and there's a, for me surprising, not for you perhaps, percent of folks in the county that are renters in homes. And so putting this on the property tax does address, should folks that may be in a house for a year or two pay these long-term investments, or does that belong with property owners? That's the rationale. I understand, like everything, there's different views on that, certainly. There was no decision made last night other than to proceed with the legally required 218 notice. There was not some secret pre-planned decision. The prior meeting, the board decided to hold off to the next meeting. I had no idea what was going to occur or not, so those kind of spurious things.
And Ben, when is that next meeting, please?
So last night triggers a 218 notice. We have scheduled 2 public workshops. Gosh. Actually, they are important dates. Thank you for asking.
Those are important dates.
So we'll be going out to, like I said, we've been to Rotary clubs and a number of
It's just a
different.
good time to announce those workshops.
I apologize.
Okay.
One is May 15th. We have another one. I just am not 100% confident on the date. And then
That's
the
a
rate.
public workshop.
Absolutely. We have 2 prior to May 28th, which is our rate hearing. So those meetings are up on our website, will be formally noticed. They're identified in the 218 notice, and we'll be communicating on social media and everywhere else, talking about those 2 workshops and the rate hearing.
Sure. Ben, I'm sorry.
I think there was a misstatement that San Anselmo Council took a stand. In fact, it was quite the opposite. There was discussion, but no seemingly intent to take a stand on this issue.
Okay, Ben.
I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
Backing up from the rate hearing, correct me if I'm wrong, but after the rate hearing, there's a limited number of days. Is it 45 days before?
Right, so.
Tell us what happens.
What happens at this point is the 218, now staff has authorization to finalize it and mail it out. From the last mailing, there has to be at least 45 days until the rate hearing. And for us is something like 55. In between, we have 2 public workshops and a whole lot of additional forums like this.
So the action on the rates is the rate hearing.
That's correct.
And there are 2 public workshops where the public can influence the board with respect to the action?
I would say absolutely, and I would say the history of this district, as best I understand it, is that does occur. So it's far from a de facto that what's indicated in the 218 will in fact be enacted. I don't know that it will or won't, but I'm just sharing. Historically, there has been shifts following the workshops and the public input.
Is there space dedicated to this proposal and the process on the district website?
Yes, what we are posting is, it could be today or tomorrow, a link from our front page that will go into detailed explanation, including a rate calculator for individuals to put in their specific information, and I think exhaustive amount of information available.
I've learned a lot tonight, and I really appreciate you coming to our council meeting. It means a lot to me. Would it be possible to, you may be hearing these similar questions or types of questions, similar issues from other members of the public at other meetings. Is it possible in the space on your website devoted to this to have these frequently asked questions? Because I thought your answers were very informative. You may not agree with them, but I thought that you lay out, there was much more understanding in the way you explained it for me. So I just think that would be helpful if that's within your capability.
Yes, we will do that. Thank you for the suggestion.
Okay, Ben, continue. Thank you.
Can
So
I just ask
Oh,
one
of
thing?
course.
Maybe, Sky, maybe you can educate me on this, because how a capital improvement fee or a capital maintenance fee is added to a property tax bill without a vote? I'm not sure how, because I looked at my property tax bill, and everything I see on here, we voted on, for the most part.
That's Likely, except that I don't mean to mistake because I don't always remember. Does our Ross Valley Sanitary collect on the property tax bill?
Let's see.
I believe
No,
that-
it doesn't. I wrote all mine down. School bonds for K-12, health bonds, mosquito, flood zone 9, watershed program, Ross Valley paramedic, Larkspur runoff charge, MMWD fire flow, Mira radio, SF Bay restoration, and the Twin Cities Police. That's that's on my tax bill.
My recollection. So I mean, obviously, you know what's on your own tax bill.
Yeah.
But so let me back. So I'm gonna try to provide as little into the weeds Prop 218 stuff as I can. One of the things that happened when the Constitution was amended by Prop 218 was it created this new category of charges called property-related fees.
I see.
Water and sewer are two categories of property-related fees, and they are special subcategories of property-related fees because they don't actually require property owner or voter approval. All that they're subject to is this 45-day notice and majority protest proceeding that you've already been discussing. So the way that works is that if a majority of property owners submit letters saying that they object to the charges, then the proposed charges, then the district would not be able to proceed with implementing them. But the district is not legally required to submit ballots to property owners or to voters to get authorization for the fee. It's just the way that the authors of Prop 218 set it up.
That clarifies it for me.
And then I was just going to say, it's just to add that there is existing authorization in state law for water districts to collect charges through the property tax bill. So 218 creates this category. It lays out a process to submit it to property owners where they can protest it, but a majority of property owners have to submit protests against it. And if that doesn't occur, then there's separate authority outside of 218 to collect the fee on the property tax bill.
Thank you.
And the collection on the property tax bill doesn't convert it into a tax. It's just a method of collection.
That clarifies
This guy,
it.
Dan has a question.
How many days are there in which a majority of the property owners need to send in protest letters?
It's the 45-day notice period. So from the date that they receive the notice until the close of the public hearing at which the board will consider adopting.
So that's the 45 days referred to earlier.
Yes.
In our case, it's a little longer, and it does, as noted, include the actual, what we take those comments at the hearing as well, and we'll have forms for folks to fill out.
So just a quick question. So what I understand from what you just said, the only remedy the public has to challenge this is a voluntary submission of letters.
Procedurally, yes, that is correct.
Otherwise, they're free to go.
Yes.
That's unfortunate.
Well, that is.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, no. I mean, it is the way that the
System works.
is the way the system works. I mean, prior to that, none of that would have even been required at all for water service charges. There would have been no mechanism to submit them to property owner assent.
So can I throw,
So I guess that's an improvement.
can you correct me if I get this wrong? So within 45 days, over 150,000 people need to send in protest letters?
It's based on the number of property owners. So we have 60-some thousand customers.
Well, I just added up the connections. Is that
Right.
incorrect?
Yes, the connections. That's the legal bar. Reflecting back, again, I'm here new, as I understand, 2 years back, there was a proposal of 2 7-year rate increases. There was a number of comments that came in, maybe 500, I don't know how many formal protests came, versus the 30,000 bar. So 500 or so comments, I'm guesstimating, but probably in that range. and the board decided not to proceed with the second-year rate increase. So the suggestion that that's the only way, I think, doesn't reflect the actual history of the district that appears to be responsive to the comments that come in.
But that's a discretionary matter. They don't have to do anything in response to those letters.
I'm just sharing what's occurred.
Okay, that's fine. I appreciate
Yeah, I just
that.
want to suggest that it's been our experience that the 218 process is very daunting, should the public want to make a protest.
I think that's fair. I also would say that our notice is unlike any I've seen. Many are very dense and opaque, and as there are some complicated tables, but I think the intent behind our notice is far different than what I've seen in many other agencies in terms of readability and navigating through it and creating a clear path for people to protest.
I would just, from my own personal point of view, I would hope the district would understand, because of the process, and there's a bit of vulnerability there, just given the daunting task should a protest be desired. I hope the district will take the questions and comments, especially about the process and the understanding of the process, to heart as you move forward through these workshops, and use those to not just cite them as public meetings as part of the process, but really build some trust.
And listen, hopefully the board
I
will.
think it's an opportunity.
Absolutely, thank you.
It's a good point. All right, do you want to continue, Ben?
I have two more
There you go.
quick responses. There was one of what other agencies around the state or something have done anything like this. I haven't looked into that. I haven't done a survey. I've worked at two, East Bay Mud, most recently at the city of Santa Rosa. So 1 out of 2, East Bay Mud, has put large capital fees collected on the property tax bill. And there was another comment, and I'm not suggesting 50% of agencies, I'm just saying based on my knowledge. There was a question, I think a very good question, that, and this is regarding residential customers that have had to upsize their potable water meters to meet sprinkler design demands and still utilize as if they still have a 5/8 inch meter. And on that, the board has directed staff to look into an approach to deal with that issue in a similar fashion of how we're dealing it with fire lines, because if it's not intended or utilized as a demand on the system, is there a way to create some process where those folks don't bear those costs, because it doesn't really meet the intent of this rate structure.
Okay, great, thank you. Council members, any more questions for Ben? I see none. All right, thank you for the presentation. This
You're
is a
welcome.
presentation, it's more like a learning session, so thank you for all the facts and for answering the questions.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
I appreciate it.
Take care, Ben. All right, with that, we'll move on. We'll move on to approval of the consent calendar. Any council members want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Okay, I'm going to open it to the public. I know 4.4 was asked to be removed to have a discussion. James, you want to come up to discuss 4.4?
In the meantime, Madam Mayor, may we move the balance of the consent calendar?
I was just going to, do we need to do that, Dan? Can we just wait to have the discussion? Is that not appropriate?
Or you want to move the whole thing at once?
It could, if I'm being a mind reader, it could be that Councilmember Hilmer knows there's people in the audience who might like to depart if you move the remainder of the consent calendar now.
Okay, James, is it going to be long?
No, just a quick comment. I appreciate very much the alacrity with which this process is moving, and also the fact that the award is below the estimate. This is a huge process for the city. I would just ask that the city adopt 2 maxims, and one is details count and the other is neatness counts and details matter. I'm a little bit concerned because at least on Madrone Avenue, I have the impression that with each successive block, each successive year, the details seem to be a little bit rougher, particularly with regard to the margin between the asphalt and the gutters. It seems to get a little less neat every year, and so I'm really hoping that the city recommits itself to the concept that neatness does count, and that hopefully the contractor will not be allowed to look at last year's work and assume that that is the proper way to go about things.
Super.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
James. All right, I bring it back to the council, and no one wants to have anything pulled. So may I have a motion for the approval of the consent calendar?
So move.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I see none. It passes. Thank you. All right, now we'll move on to the city manager's report. Dan Schwartz.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Handful of items to make you aware of. First, very exciting, there is a new button on the homepage of the City of Larkspur website, and that button takes you to the website of the Central Marin Fire Department or Authority, depending on your
Not until it's Friday.
preference. So that's very exciting. Their website's up and running, and on Friday at 9 a.m., what I imagine will be a relatively quick meeting of the Fire Council will occur, and we hope the Fire Council will approve documents that will finalize the contract that the new fire agency needs with PERS so that we can transfer our personnel. And that's the last step, and then it will be its own independent agency with its own staff. So we're all very excited about that.
Looks good.
I'm one of the city managers in the county that's joined the county administrator and fire chiefs from around the county, working on how to implement some of the ideas that have come out of the lessons learned analysis that was led by the county with respect to the wildfire incidents in the North Bay and what we can do here in Marin. And I just want to let members of the public know that on Tuesday coming up at 1:30, the county fire chief, Jason Weber, is going to give an update to the Board of Supervisors on the lessons learned, what we're doing, remind folks what the study was about. And if you can't attend, it's streaming online. Encourage folks who are interested in that topic to look for that. So that's 1:30 next Tuesday. Also want to let the council knows this and let the public know we had a resignation on the Planning Commission, so we have a vacancy. Applications are now open and being taken. Folks who are interested in applying should contact the city clerk, Jamie Carrillo, and Jamie's contact information for that process is on the homepage of the website, and the due date is April 10. So folks who are interested should start putting that together soon. And then lastly, a couple calendaring items. Also speaking of the Planning Commission, the mayor asked staff to work to arrange joint meetings over the next several months with your various boards and commissions, and we'll be starting with the Planning Commission here at your May 1st meeting. So there'll be a 5:30 session with a joint meeting of both bodies to talk about what's going on, mutual issues, and the coming year. And then lastly, we've had a lot of folks in the public asking if and when you'd be talking about issues around telecom. The public likes to just simply call it 5G. Our ordinance is more broadly about telecom regulation here in the city, but for all intents and purposes, this is the so-called 5G discussion, and that's going to take place at your 2 April meetings. You'll have an ordinance brought to you then for consideration, provided the Planning Commission advances it. They're going to be hearing it at their meeting here at the end of March. So with that, Madam Mayor, turn it back to you.
Thank you. Council members, any questions for Dan? I see none. All right, we'll move on to the council members' reports and comments. Do we have any? Okay, Catherine?
I'll just piggyback on to what the city manager said. I was invited by Supervisor Katie Rice to get a working group of council members and Chief Weber and Chief Tyler from Novato presented to all of us on Monday afternoon, and there was a representative from every city and town in Marin, and this council member working group was called to also help implement the lessons learned from the North Bay fire storms of last year from a policy perspective so that there's consistency in our policies. So I'll continue to report out on that. And Matthew Hamill came also to the meeting to describe what the other working group has been doing. So it's called Marin Prepared Together. So it's an idea that has stemmed from the ad hoc committee of this last year that we all need to get together and really implement across jurisdictions. So that was Monday, and I think Supervisor Rice is going to try to hold that meeting every 2 weeks.
That's great. Super.
So
Thank
that's
you.
all.
Thank you. I do. The mayors go with a whistle stop, and we serve meals on wheels. And I went to 2 residents here in Larkspur. It saddened me what I saw. I saw loneliness, not able to get around, transportation. So it prompted me to work with our Commissioner on Aging. We're going to host, starting in May, senior lunches with the mayor so we can ask questions and hear their needs and figure out how we can accommodate that. And I'm so pleased that we started the Twin City villages that help these seniors stay in their home as long as possible, run by volunteers. Also, we met with the task force. The task force is building funds to raise to build the new Larkspur Library Community Center. And so far, their goal is to raise $212,640. And I'm so excited to say they've raised $188,000 so far. And if you haven't seen the Marin IJ article, please do. It's quite informative and it's just wonderful. So thank you for that. And then those that have contributed to the $188,000 are local families, along with the Larkspur Library Foundation, Friends of the Library, Salesforce Foundation, and of course the City of Larkspur. They need to raise more funds. They are lacking around $20,000. So if you want to support this, please go to thecommons@larkspur.org. Some more update about the task force. They have hired a fundraising agency. So that's exciting. They have a working group formed, and to dates, on March the 26th, they've coordinated a meeting with the library boards, Friends of the Library, and the Library Foundation. And then also on April the 23rd at 4:40, they're going to have a seedling campaign to thank those that have contributed. So great job, task force. It's very exciting news. Okay, with that, we will move on to the public hearings. 7.1, waive first reading and introduce ordinance 1037, amending the Larkspur Municipal Code by adding chapter 5.38, establishing a tobacco retailer license program and regulating the sale of tobacco products, repealing chapter 6.16.13 and amending chapter 6.16.010. So may we have a staff report, please?
Okay, good evening, Madam Mayor, council members. The goal of the ordinance before you today is to streamline tobacco regulations within the Central Marin communities in an effort to reduce smoking and promote public health. The proposed ordinance would incorporate the following 3 components into the Larkspur Municipal Code. 1, implementation of a tobacco retailer licensing program. 2, prohibition of the sale of flavored tobacco products in all forms. And 3, prohibition of pharmacies from engaging in tobacco retailing. Please note that since the proposed ordinance includes the requirements found in current Larkspur Municipal Code Section 6.16.130, this ordinance contains a provision to repeal that section of the code and rename Chapter 6.16. Before we dive in, I want to call out Attachment 2. There are currently 7 tobacco retailers within the city that would be affected by these new regulations, and you can find them listed in Attachment 2 of this item. So going into more detail, first, the proposed ordinance would establish a tobacco retailer licensing program. Under this program, all businesses that sell tobacco products must receive a license from the city in exchange for the privilege of selling tobacco products. Tobacco products includes traditional products such as cigarettes and cigars, as well as any electronic smoking devices and liquid tobacco solutions. This would be a yearly license done in conjunction with the annual business license renewal process, and the city is recommending a fee of $50 a year to cover the cost of license administration. This program is really an enforcement opportunity for the city. Tobacco retailers that violate local, state, or federal law can then have their licenses suspended or revoked. Enforcement of the tobacco retailer licensing program would begin January 1st, 2020, which will allow ample time for public outreach to communicate the changes to tobacco retailers and allow time for tobacco retailers to apply for and receive a license with their annual business license renewal next year. Second, the proposed ordinance would prohibit the sale of all flavored tobacco products within the city. As mentioned above, tobacco products include traditional products such as cigarettes and cigars, as well as any electronic smoking devices and liquid tobacco solutions. Enforcement of the provision prohibiting the sale of flavored tobacco products is also recommended to begin January 1st, 2020, which will allow for ample time for public outreach to communicate the changes to tobacco retailers and also allow time for tobacco retailers to sell any remaining supplies of currently stocked items. Finally, the proposed ordinance would prohibit any pharmacy from engaging in the sale of tobacco products. This does not include any products approved by the United States Food and Drug Administration for use in treating nicotine or tobacco dependence. As with the other provisions, this provision would be enforced beginning January 1st, 2020. However, to note, there are currently no pharmacies within city limits that sell tobacco products. To talk a little bit about enforcement of this ordinance, first, the county. Marin County has an MOU with Marin County Sheriff to conduct regular compliance checks on tobacco retailers. Bob Curry, who I believe is here tonight, he is the program manager of Marin County Tobacco Control Program, and he will be the city's contact and help us close the loop to ensure that the city is now notified of any violations that the sheriffs find. Additionally, CMPA recently received grant money, a 3-year grant program for tobacco education and enforcement, which allows them to conduct operations with youth decoy. The city will work with CMPA Sergeant McVeigh to again close that loop to ensure the city is now notified of any violations that they find. Once the city is notified of a violation, the city can move forward with enforcement, which under the proposed section 5.38.120, violations can lead to suspension or revocation of the license. The city received public comment from the American Cancer Society and the American Lung Association in support of this ordinance, which is in front of you, and I am happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Great, thank you, Jamie. Council members, any questions? Okay, let me open up to the public.
I know that we're going to listen to public comment, but I'd like to just move the staff recommendation right now.
Let's listen to public. I think we need to listen to public.
I know, but I'm just saying I think we're there.
Okay.
Hi. Jamie, can I just ask, I haven't frequented any of the bars lately, but there used to be vending machines of cigarettes in bars. Do we have any of those? Do we know of, like at the Peso?
I haven't seen those in years.
Or anything? I just wondered.
No.
I do not.
Boy, you need to get out.
God, I know.
Hi, please state your name and where you live, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor and council members, my name is Irina DeFischer. I'm a resident of Greenbrae, and I'm a family physician and past president of the Marin Medical Society. I'm here today representing the San Francisco Marin Medical Society to voice their support of Ordinance 1037, particularly the second component, which bans the sale of flavored tobacco products in Larkspur. Today, March 20th, is Kick Butts Day, brought to us by the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids. Last year, the Surgeon General declared youth e-cigarette use a national epidemic because of a sharp increase in vaping among middle and high school students. The best way to prevent tobacco-related illness and death is to avoid nicotine addiction in new users. The tobacco industry's strategy for attracting our youth is flavors. Candy flavors like mint or menthol, cotton candy, and gummy bears mask the harsh taste of tobacco. They're highly appealing to youth, and they lead to nicotine addiction. I urge you to protect the health of Larkspur youth by passing this comprehensive tobacco retail license ordinance that also bans the sale of all flavored tobacco products. This policy will drastically limit access to the products that are tobacco industry's primary strategy for targeting and addicting new smokers. Thank you for your leadership in protecting our youth.
Super, thank you. Anyone else?
Shout out to Irina's brother-in-law, Bob Sennett.
Cindy Winter, Greenbrae. Last week, the New York Times published 2 articles related to vaping. I'll send the links electronically to our city clerk in case anybody would like to read the articles. Meanwhile, here's a very brief summary of each one. First article, do you remember Kool-Aid? From the 1960s until about 20 years ago, tobacco companies were promoting these sugar-laden drinks to children. Kool-Aid came in a repertoire of tested flavors in convenient, brightly colored packaging. Sales boomed. And now it's the same old story, a variety of enticing flavors in convenient, colorful, shiny containers. Tobacco executives have always understood how to earn customer loyalty at an early age. Second article, Scott Gottlieb, Commissioner of the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, has abruptly resigned. He had found himself in an unexpected crisis, the explosion of vaping among young people, many of whom were becoming addicted to nicotine. His plans for stricter regulation of vaping and smoking were opposed by powerful lobbying firms. Does this sound familiar? As someone with a family history of smoking problems, I've been contributing to the American Lung Association and to Americans for Non-Smokers' Rights in Berkeley for probably 40 years. I deeply appreciate the efforts of Larkspur and the Central Marin Police Authority to thwart the schemes of these insidious merchants of misery and death. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Cindy. Anyone else?
Madam President, Council, my name's Larry Meredith. I'm a Larkspur resident, and I urge you to approve this ordinance. Clearly, the IJ reported on the front page today that Marin is the healthiest county, again, of all the 58 counties in California. And that means that we all have to do our part to have policies and practices that minimize smoking. There's no safe level of tobacco use. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Oh, come on up. You can do it. Come on. I want to hear what you two have to say.
Yeah. Do you want to go
So
first?
your names and where you're from, please?
My name's Lucas Tress. I live in Larkspur. I go to Redwood High School.
Great.
I just want to thank you for moving it forward.
Oh, that's great, Lucas. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Jasmine Garrity, and I'm here as a representative for the Coalition Connection. So that's formerly the Twin Cities Coalition for Healthy Youth, which covers Larkspur and Corte Madera within that. And I just want to say thank you so much for moving this forward. If we look at the rates of use, especially at Redwood High School, we're seeing really high numbers. So looking at policies as a solution to that's really helpful for us.
And I know our council member's gone, but Larry Chu
Yes.
really has been involved with that program. You guys have
Yeah.
done a great job.
Yeah,
Great.
thank you so much.
Thanks for coming up. Appreciate it. I knew you were going to come up.
Hi, my name is Jeremiah Mock. I live in Corte Madera, your neighbor, and a cousin and I and some high school interns have been collecting tobacco waste at high schools throughout the Bay Area, including here in Marin County, and we thought that it would be useful to share with you what some of that looks like, how it's getting into our environment. So the caps...
You can give it to Jamie if that's okay, and she'll, thank you.
Sure. The colored caps, the green caps are mint caps, and the orange caps are mango caps, and that's the large majority of what we find at schools. In fact, about 98% of the caps that we found are flavored caps. So that gives you some sense of what the epidemic looks like in terms of jewel use that is really running rampant in our communities. But it's also important to note that there are a whole other range of products. And these are what flavored cigarillos and flavored little cigars look like. And you can see the design and the coloring is especially for targeting kids. These in particular, you can take a look at those. These are 5 for $1. So they're incredibly cheap, and they're considered by the industry to be starter products for young people. Those are flavored cigars, this one right here, and those are flavored cigarillos, so they have a plastic tip on them. So the industry has moved rapidly into this whole area, and particularly targeting low-income and Latino and African-American kids, and that's where we find all of that kind of waste. So I just want to share with you that the step that you're taking is in line with what the county has already done and what your neighbors in Corte Madera just passed last night, and we're really excited about the fact that Marin County may become the first county in the United States to have all jurisdictions ban all flavors. So thanks for your contribution toward that.
To all of you, thank you for your hard work in protecting our youth. Really appreciate it. All right, I'll bring that back to the council.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Madam Mayor, may I make one more comment?
Absolutely, Jamie.
The title of the ordinance, and then on the second to the last page of the ordinance, section 3, it says section 6.16.13. No, excuse me. It says chapter 6.16.130. If you could ask that to be amended, it should say section, not chapter.
Okay. So when we make the motion, we need to fix that? Got that, Dan Hammer?
With that amendment.
Yes.
With that amendment, Madam Mayor,
Okay.
I so move.
And may I have a second?
I second. And actually, I would request that the council approve this by acclamation.
With that amendment, I so move, Madam Mayor.
Second? I guess we have to second that.
Yeah.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We acclaim.
Anyone opposed? I see none. So that's great. That's wonderful. Good job.
Thanks for everybody's
Yes.
work and help.
Absolutely. Applaud all of you. Super. All right. Thanks for the show and tell, too. It's amazing. Okay. I just gotta wait. All right. We'll just move along to, we're going to close the public hearing. See, you taught me that. And we'll move on to business item 8.1, appointment to the library board. All right, I have to share something with everyone. This is always difficult for the council to make these decisions because most people that apply, one, we appreciate you applying for these commissions and boards. But this one especially, this library board, everyone, all three of them, which was Lee Estes, Armel Fetterman, and Jonathan Sambroom, you were all overly qualified, and we all walked away thinking this is going to be a tough choice. We really appreciate your taking your precious time and want to volunteer to assist Larkspur on its important programs and councils and boards. So once again, very tough decision. The council either, I asked, we don't talk about it on the dais. That was my suggestion. So I have emails and texts with the ones that have been, the one that has been chosen. Again, very tough decision. Thanks again. So with that, Jonathan Sambroom has been appointed to sit on the library board. I guess.
Madam Mayor, I do think you actually need to take a vote.
Oh, I do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I'll move that.
All right. I didn't know that. I thought we didn't have to do that. Dan?
Yeah.
That was my hope.
Sorry.
I'll second Dan's motion.
Okay.
Is that a motion? Yeah.
That's, okay. So, do I?
All in
do I-
favor?
All in favor?
All in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Good job.
For Jonathan?
Correct.
Okay, Sambroom. All right. I didn't ask for a motion after I made that. Okay, so Jonathan, congratulations. Lee and Armel, there's other positions coming up. We hope you apply for those. With that, I guess we adjourn the meeting.
I'll move that.
All right, we have a motion, a second?
I don't know. I think we have one more minute until 8 o'clock. and
All in
that'll
favor?
get us there.
Aye. All
Aye.
right, it's adjourned. Thank you.